This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
This is Global Business. A very warm welcome to the show wherever you're tuning in from. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's start with a look at the market. Signs that the governments of China and Germany are prepared to meet their respective economic slowdowns with stimulus measures helped lift the Johannesburg Stock Exchange today, with the local bills recovering by slightly over 1%. China lowered borrowing costs for businesses over the weekend, while reports on Friday suggested the German government was willing to relax its strict budget deficit rules in response to its flagging economy. Coming up on the show tonight. Ghana revokes 23 licenses as part of efforts to clean up its banking sector. Iran rules out negotiations with the US over the nuclear deal. And we'll tell you why this car wash has been voted Johannesburg's most loved sport to clean your wheels. We begin in Ghana, where a move by the Bank of Ghana to clean up its financial sector has opened a Pandora's box of illegal transfers and poor management in the sector. As a result, with effect from Monday, the Apex Bank has revoked licenses of 23 financial institutions, consisting of mostly savings and loans companies. According to the central bank, the financial institutions were insolvent and failed to recapitalize on time. It's also investigating how some of the institutions illegally transferred customer savings and investments, with some of those funds now untraceable. In order to protect depositors' funds, the bank says the government has made funds available to enable the receiver pay depositors their claims when their claims are validated. New measures have also been put in place to ensure that the financial sector remains safe for businesses and customers. Let's get more details on this from Nabil Ahmed Rufai, who's live for us in Accra. Nabil, the Bank of Ghana has revoked licenses of 23 financial institutions, and these include 9 banks. Do we know how much money the institutions are holding and the fate of depositors?
Hello, Peninah. Indeed, the World Bank in June this year estimated that Ghana would need 1.6% of its GDP to finish up reforms in the microfinance sector and savings and loans companies. Now, that translates into $1 billion of taxpayers' money. Already, the banking cleanup, which started 2 years ago, had cost the economy over $2 billion and another $166 million that the Bank of Ghana said had been given by the government to begin the cleanup in the microfinance sector reform by the end of this year. Now, the Bank of Ghana has appointed a receiver to ensure that depositors are paid their investments or claims. Now, this process is still ongoing, I should say, and the main concerns of the depositors is to retrieve their monies from the banks and the financial institutions. Peninah.
All right, so the Bank of Ghana started this cleanup exercise 2 years ago in a bid to restore confidence into the banking system. Has the process been convincing enough to players in the industry and investors?
Indeed, Peninah, there have been panic withdrawals since 2017. That's 2 years ago when the Bank of Ghana started its cleanup of the financial institutions. Contrary to boosting up confidence in the banking sector, there are many Ghanaians, especially those in the informal sector, now feeling more reluctant to deposit their monies in the banks or the financial institutions for fear of getting their monies lost. And so there are some others who are also saying that the cleanup was necessary in order to boost confidence in the sector so that when people deposit their money, they'll be assured of a safe environment to keep their money. But then there are those who are still not confident in the banking sector. They fear to put their money in the banks. There are some who are saying they will just be keeping their monies at home or even get a big safe box and be keeping their money rather than keeping it in the banking institutions. Peninah.
And of course, all of this has raised queries on the state of management in the banking sector, Nabil. The bank itself admits that a survey of the sector in the last few years unveiled a series of challenges. So what challenges is it facing in efforts to transform the sector?
Well, the Bank of Ghana, in its defense, said it had to give the financial institutions a chance to correct their books and also an opportunity to redeem themselves by adhering to the central bank's regulations. So that's what it had to come to say to defend itself, that it wasn't actually sleeping on the job, but then it gave the opportunity for these institutions to do the right thing. Now, it says it went further to extend the deadline of the minimum capital requirement for the banks, which was about $73 million. However, after many of these considerations for the banks and some of the microfinance institutions, they were not able to meet their requirements, and it had to finally shut down these banks and also merge some of them to form what is now known as the Consolidated Bank of Ghana. And they feel they've done the right thing at the moment, and they should inject some confidence in the financial system in Ghana.
Well, the bank also says it will launch the operations of the Ghana Deposit Protection Scheme next month, and it's saying that is to further strengthen protection of depositors' interests. But how will this scheme operate?
Peninah, the Ghana Deposit Protection Scheme is actually to be implemented by a corporation, which is an independent agency of the Bank of Ghana. The scheme is a financial insurance scheme that seeks to protect small depositors in the event of any occurrence of an insured event by the payment of the compensation to them. So this scheme is to protect the trust and also confidence in the financial system by protecting those who deposit their money in these banks. It also seeks to ensure a safe, sound and efficient financial system in Ghana. So for this particular scheme, it is believed that it's going to really boost confidence in the financial sector, and people, the small scale and medium enterprises, will be able to confidently deposit their money in the banks. At the end of the day, they know should something happen untoward, their monies will still be safe.
All right, Nabil, thank you for that. Nabil Ahmed Rafai live in Accra. Now, Egypt's Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics says the country's inflation rate dropped to 7.8% in July from around 8.7% in June. The decline is a relief for the North African economy, which has suffered from a recession since its 2011 uprising. From Cairo, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim.
Gamal Mohammed is grocery shopping for his family of 3. He says that prices of some items have dropped for the first time in a while.
The prices are much cheaper than I expected. I think it's because that there has been a huge supply of goods in the market. Tomatoes, for example, are at 5 Egyptian pounds only. That's half the price 2 months ago. Mainly the prices of vegetables and meat have dropped the most.
Gamal is optimistic of better times ahead.
The signs are clear. For the first time, the prices remain fixed during Eid holidays. In the past, prices increased during the holidays. Also, there was a salary rise last month, so we have no complaints anymore.
Inflation has surprisingly dropped to its lowest in 4 years. This is in spite of electricity and fuel subsidy cuts in July that should have raised prices.
The success of the economic reform program and economic policies, also the success in controlling the markets and traders, has prevented unrealistic price hikes.
Rigorous economic reforms have had a load on Egyptians. Inflation had reached a record high 33% in 2016, but officials had promised the positive effects of these reforms would be felt end of 2019.
The central bank and the government are working on making the economy strong to sustain any shocks from abroad and to be a competitive market internationally to improve living conditions.
Experts predict that inflation will continue to drop in the next 2 quarters and to reach around 7% by mid-2020. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
A look at your corporate news now. 17 companies listed on the Nairobi Securities Exchange have seen their share price per unit fall below 5 Kenya shillings or $5 Collectively, the 17 firms, which include flag carrier Kenya Airways, Uchumi Supermarkets and Mumias Sugar, have seen their market cap fall by 45%, losing almost $400 million since the beginning of the year. Botswana's budget retailer Choppies says it plans to sell its 88 stores in South Africa after completing a strategic review of its business. Choppies is currently suspended from trading on its primary bourse in Botswana as well as on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. It saw its shares plunge more than 60% last September after announcing a delay in publishing its financial statements. Boeing has pushed back the entry into service of an ultra-long-range version of its forthcoming 777X widebody. This means that Boeing engineers have frozen development works on the ultra-long-range version of the 777X. The latest delay comes as the grounding of the plane maker's money-spinning 737 MAX single aisle enters its 6th month. And public companies in the United States lost $435 million in the second quarter of the year after China's tech giant Huawei was put on an entity list in May. A Reuters report shows that Huawei spent around $70 billion on components last year, $11 billion of which was spent on U.S. firms like Qualcomm, Intel Corporation and Micron Technology. Experts believe the long-term effects of the restrictions could weaken the competitiveness of U.S. firms. And that's a look at your corporate headlines. You're watching Global Business. Still ahead. The African Development Bank says external forces may force it to review its growth outlook for the continent. And Kenya prepares for its first batch of frozen avocados to be sent to China.
Is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Tunisia. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
The head of the African Development Bank says the bank could review its economic growth projection for the continent of 4% in 2019 and 4.1% in 2020. That's if global external shocks accelerate. Akinwumi Adesina warned that the US-China trade war and uncertainty over Brexit pose risks to Africa's economic prospects, which are increasing by the day. According to Adesina, due to the trade war, import demand from China has fallen significantly, and demand for products and raw materials from Africa will only fall even further. He adds that it will also have another effect with regards to China's own outward-bound investments on the continent. Let's discuss this further with Professor Peter Bauer, a professor at the School of Business and Economics at the University of Johannesburg. Professor Bauer, thank you very much for joining us this evening. So we're hearing the African Development Bank talk about Africa's economic prospects being affected by the uncertainty of Brexit and the trade war between US and China. How exactly have these global events affected the economic climate here in the continent?
Well, that's very complicated. It's extremely complicated in the moment because of the level and extent of the uncertainty that we're actually experiencing right now. Much of Africa's productivity and output is primarily in the production and export of raw materials, which is obviously used in production and manufacture of items, which they then of course trade between each other. So if we got a trade war right now and we're starting to see trade slowdowns and between the major trading partners, that's most definitely going to affect us here in Africa.
All right, so the bank is talking about...
Obviously the spillover is going to be things...
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Sorry, Carrie. Oh, you see, the big thing what I'm concerned about right now is the very high levels of existing unemployment and poverty and inequality that we're actually experiencing within the African continent. For example, if I speak about South Africa, we've just seen our unemployment levels climb, and we're looking at business confidence levels actually coming down. So as we can see, if we're going to see a slowdown in international trade between us and our major trading partners, be it the US, the UK or China, we are obviously going to experience a slowdown in output and productivity, and we're not going to be able to absorb those additional workers into the workforce. And so prospects in terms of unemployment don't look very good for us.
All right, so we're hearing from the bank, very optimistic about the Continental Free Trade Area that was operationalized last month, and the bank talking about it being a very good platform to stimulate economic growth in Africa. In your perspective, is this enough to cushion African economies from global shocks?
Well, especially, if you take a look at how the 2008 financial crisis actually affected most of us in Africa, it's going to take a huge, shall we say, impact to be able to shift the position of us in Africa. Many of us are in a sort of, as we say, developing countries, and in very much of the time we're at the mercy of what happens in the rest of the developed world. And that is a problem because we need to sell our products. In terms of things such as food crisis and food shortages, sure, Africa's continent is something that we can look at towards producing and contributing towards world production. But of course, the impact of global warming, environmental degradation, soil erosion through over-farming, overgrazing, all of these things are going to have an impact on us, especially now at this critical time.
All right. The bank is also saying that it is set to review the economic outlook for the continent. And of course, this is coming as we see more and more countries in Africa going through austerity measures. In your opinion, what is the state of African economies, and is there a crisis looming?
Well, in terms of a crisis, again, as I say, extremely difficult to actually put our finger on that. We have many different countries, and each country has its own level and extent of economic, so we say, growth, output, productivity. For example, just a little while ago, South Africa was considered one of the biggest growing economies in Africa, and now that has been handed over to other countries, and South Africa is only like in third going into fourth position. As well, if you take a look at the role of foreign direct investment and bank credit, so we say outlook, the Moody's ratings, for example, South Africa is, for example, not more the strongest economy in Africa. So there's a lot of, shall we say, there's a lot of play between the different economies, and all of them come with their own challenges and problems, etc. If you go up to North Africa and you see, for example, the amount of people that are looking for work or considering traveling to Europe, looking for an alternative home to move into a country which might be able to give them better opportunities, that should give us an idea about the extent and the challenges that we're actually facing in Africa.
And there is a concern that, African countries have taken on an unsustainable amount of debt. Is this a feeling you share, and how can this be corrected?
Well, yes, we are extremely, shall we say, indebted. And, a number of steps should be taken, especially when it comes to working with the World Bank or the IMF. And there are two possible routes that we could take. One is, of course, your debt forgiveness. The other one, being your debt relief. But at the end of the day, if a country is sitting with some form of repayment and a weakening exchange rate, it just makes that debt more and more expensive and keeps them in this poverty trap for longer periods of time. And of course, that coupled with, shall we say, political instability that we see very often happening, conflict between countries, conflict within countries, between regions, high levels of shall we say, of corruption that we don't seem to be able to slow down or control. These things are all having impact on investor confidence in Africa. So if they're going to we're looking at investors, we want to create the right kind of environment to attract the right kind of investor to uplift our economies. And in order to attract the right kind of investment, you need the right sort of profile to be put into place. And these kind of profiles include, shall we say, a stable economy, some more open, transparent governments, etc. All the things that we really do need. So will we be able to control the debt? This is a persistent problem. Half of me wants to say, well, we've been providing resources and raw materials to much of the developed world for such a long time. And we've been paying the price, not the developed countries. They're into high levels of technology, high levels of output, high levels of productivity, but the real cost has fallen on developing countries. And sometimes I feel that maybe it's about time that the developing countries have an opportunity to take our power back and say, it's the responsibility of many of the developed countries who have gained from us, who have gained from our resources, to actually help and to actually alleviate some of the debt that, can we say, is indirectly being created through the very developed countries who we are taking loans from.
Oh, it was great chatting with you, Professor Bauer. Thank you for your time tonight. Professor Peter Bauer, live for us there in Johannesburg. Meanwhile, the Office of the United States Trade Representative announced that it would delay the 10% tariff on some $300 billion of imports from China. Jose Motswane is an international trade manager of Asia at Western Cape Investment and Trade Promotion Agency in South Africa. And he says the U.S. government's pursuit of unilateral trade protectionism would seriously damage the interests of developing countries and harm the global economy. Motswane argues that the correct way to achieve common economic development is through collaboration.
We've seen a protectionist global climate does one thing: it hurts the developing world. It hurts countries that are on upward trajectories, which are still quite delicate. And often when countries close their markets off using tariffs, they make it difficult for countries A, developing countries A, to source the things that they need to allow that developmental process to take place. And B, what it ultimately does is it thwarts that progress. And so China's insistence and posture on an open economy, global economy, is one that is aligned to a lot of developing countries' economic strategies and ambitions. And so for us, that's the win-win.
The Tunisian government has acknowledged the risks faced by the country's economy due to inability to meet growing domestic demand for energy. According to an official report, the North African economy meets only 8% of its annual energy needs from its domestic oil and gas resources. With the details, here's CGTN's Adnet Shawashi.
The Tunisian National Oil Company has warned that the country's energy independence rate, which represents the ratio of available resources and primary energy compared to consumption, has decreased at an alarming rate from 95% in 2010 to 51% in 2017 and 48% in 2018.
The annual report is clear. Tunisia needs to review its energy strategy and to reduce this dependence, which increases fuel imports and has a negative impact and many consequences on the economy.
The Energy Commission at Parliament says the expanding energy deficit is explained by the decline in available primary energy resources by 4.6% on one hand, and the increase in primary energy consumption by 1.4% on the other hand.
The share of the energy deficit in relation to the country's trade deficit went up from 5.8% in 2010 to 32.4% in 2018. This may affect the balance of payments and consequently the foreign exchange holdings and the value of the Tunisian currency.
The energy subsidy has continuously risen in the last decade. This subsidy multiplied by 5 in 2018 compared to 2010, saw its share in the total subsidy increase from 37% in 2010 to 55% in 2018, with a peak of 68% in 2013.
We recognize that the energy subsidy, which benefits less than 20% of what is required, is made at the expense of more urgent subsidies like health, commodities or expenditure on regional development, public investment and employment.
According to the Office of the Prime Minister, the Tunisian energy plan aims to generate 30% of electricity from renewable energy in order to reduce the country's dependence on imported oil and gas. The recent report of the Tunisian National Oil Company concluded that the conventional measures adopted by the state, which consist of successive increases in prices of fuel and electricity to mitigate the deficit, have not only proved ineffective, but were also sources of social unrest and strikes. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
In April this year, Kenya became the first African nation to ink a deal to export avocados to China. But how will local exporters in Kenya tap into these huge Chinese market? Here's CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy with a look at how one company in the East African nation is seizing the opportunity to send frozen avocados to China.
Earlier this year, the Kenyan government signed a trade deal allowing Kenyan farmers to export their popular haze avocados to China. Once the pact is fully implemented, the Chinese market is set to absorb over 40% of Kenya's avocado produce. This will make the world's second biggest economy, one of the largest importers of the fruit. But how exactly will Kenyan avocados be processed to meet the Chinese market?
And the processing is basically cleaning the avocado, washing it whole, and then peeling the skin, removing the seed from the avocado, and then either freezing it as a whole avocado or cutting it into small pieces. Once it is frozen, which takes roughly about 45 minutes to an hour, we freeze it at minus 40 degrees. And we will then take it out of the freezer room and we will pack it into the bags that it's supposed to go into.
After being frozen, the packed avocados will be sent to the Kenyan coastal city of Mombasa. It's there that the fruit will then be loaded onto a ship to be sailed to China.
And that's normally between 30 to 35 days sailing time into China. So once in China, then Shanghai, we will have it cleared by customs and ready for distribution to the various parties.
In the meantime, following several months of preparations, the first batch of the Kenyan frozen avocados are in their final steps to be shipped.
So hopefully we should have a trial shipment by air the coming weekend. And once that is successful, we should be able to have a container of frozen avocado shipped out by September.
According to Vishal, their current plan is to send one container, which roughly translates into about 17 tons of frozen avocados to China monthly. This is, however, just the beginning. The company intends to expand the capacity of its facility to better embrace the huge Chinese market.
Our current capacity, we are able to process 3,000 kilos of whole avocado, which results in approximately about 1.5 tons of processed avocado on an average. We intend to increase that to about 9 tons of processed avocado every single day once we've expanded our facility and increased our capacity as well.
Vertical Agro Group is just one of the growing army of companies falling into the Kenyan avocado export market.
In the next 4 to 5 years, the overall volume of avocados from Kenya, the production is going to be exceedingly high. It's not being absorbed by our traditional buyers. Will need to have to be absorbed elsewhere. And so the opportunity that the Chinese market offers is just that part of diversifying marketing arrangement.
According to reports, China's growing health-conscious middle class is fueling an increase in the demand for avocado. This is set to further diversify Kenya's avocado export market into a global leader. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN.
You're watching Global Business. Coming up after the break. Iran rules out negotiations with America over the nuclear deal. And the US delays a ban on Huawei by 90 days.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Peninah Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
Reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Let's now shift to the ongoing trade friction between Tehran and Washington. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif has ruled out any talks with the United States of a new agreement on the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. Zarif, who was speaking in Finland, says any mediation should focus on bringing the US back to the 2015 nuclear deal, which it left last year.
We reached that good deal, and the United States withdrew from that good deal. So any mediation should be how they can come back to the negotiating table that they left. How can they come back to the commitments that they made? How can they come back to a Security Council resolution that they sponsored, not just voted on, but sponsored? Certainly the United States continues to try to make more escalation by passing a rather purely political court decision on this ship, which is a travesty of justice and law.
A leaked cross-government study is warning of the impact of a no-deal Brexit, outlining the worst-case scenario. Details from the dossier warn of food and medicine shortages if the UK leaves the EU without a deal. However, Michael Gove, who is responsible for no-deal preparation, said the document was old and Brexit planning had accelerated since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has more.
Britain will experience bumps in the road if it leaves the European Union without a deal. However, the UK government says it's more prepared for that outcome than it previously was.
The document that has appeared in the Sunday Times was an attempt in the past to work out what the very, very worst situation would be so that we could take steps to mitigate that. And we have taken steps, not just to deal with some of the risks, but also to make sure that our economy and our country are better placed than ever to leave the European Union on October the 31st.
According to documents leaked by the UK's Sunday Times, but whose interpretation was contested by ministers, Britain will face shortages of fuel, food and medicine if it leaves the European Union without a transition deal. And just as the details emerged, Brexit Secretary Stephen Barclay has signed an order that will end all European Union law applying in Britain from October 31st. In a tweet posted Sunday, Barclay said he had signed the legislation setting in stone the repeal of the European Communities Act 1972. The European Communities Act 1972 is a vehicle that sees regulations flow into British law directly from the EU's lawmaking bodies in Brussels. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson tweeted on the same day that signing the document means that the United Kingdom will take back control of its laws on Brexit Day.
It is the case that the UK government have been clear that we will not put up any infrastructure at the border. There's no return to a hard border. We will have a system of very, very limited checks, simply where international law requires it. So we are not going to ensure that there are any impediments on the Irish border. What the European Union decide, well, that's a matter for them.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel is, however, cautiously optimistic about these developments. While at a special opening of the Chancellery building in Berlin, she outlined Germany's position on Brexit.
We are prepared for everything. One could say, even if we do not reach an agreement, but I will try in my power to find solutions until the last day of the negotiations. It would be better to leave with an agreement than without one. But should it come to that, then we are prepared for this eventuality.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is due to visit Germany next week. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
China's foreign trade has continued its robust growth with a 3.3% surge amidst the trade war with the United States. The results are considered a boost despite the previous forecasts by analysts who credit the performance to several factors, including the China Belt and Road Initiative.
China's Belt and Road Initiative has secured infrastructure development and investments across an estimated 152 countries. The plan has also supplemented trade, boosting China's economy immensely. However, the ongoing trade war with the United States has influenced a change in the dynamics. Various Chinese goods have been subjected to tariffs, which have led to markups of products.
The first reason would be that American companies have placed larger orders to make provisions and thus to make up for any price increases that could be experienced by products coming from China as a result of the trade war. The other reason would be that Chinese companies would have had time to find other markets, including the countries of the European Union, Africa, and Latin America. And these countries would have bought more than they did before. So these are basically the reasons that can explain the growth of China's trade balance despite the various U.S. sanctions.
The Belt and Road Initiative has offered regional connectivity as China pushes to establish a trading-centered network in global affairs. The country's economic growth has been accelerated by the potential rise in foreign trade. According to customs data, exports increased 6.7% in 2019, widening the trade surplus by 47.4%.
The most important thing in economic life is competitiveness, and Chinese economy competitiveness is now beyond doubt. China has several instruments that it can use. There is the efficiency of its economy and the currency, especially that the yuan has seen a slight decline. There are also major projects such as Belt and Road, which in terms of investments will allow China to make trillion-dollar investments over several years. China also has more than $3 trillion in reserves, so if it wanted to attack the U.S. currency, it would have already done so. I do not think we should be alarmed by the measures taken by the Trump administration because these measures affect Americans first. They will increase the prices of products imported from China, and it is the American consumer that has to pay.
In recent years, China has become one of the largest global trading partners. Its revenues are forecasted to grow with a potential increase in trade facilitation and in a bid to construct a unified large market. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
The United States says the ban on Chinese tech giant Huawei will not come into force for another 90 days. According to the U.S. Commerce Ministry, the latest extra grace period has been designed to allow companies to trade with Huawei while adjusting to the restrictions. However, despite the temporary reprieves, the U.S. added a further 46 subsidiaries of Huawei to its banned list on Monday, making it even harder for the tech firm to continue doing business in America. Huawei has since then responded, calling the addition of new subsidiaries to the U.S. entry list politically motivated and unjust treatment that has nothing to do with national security. Meanwhile, Huawei continues to flourish despite Washington's ongoing efforts to pressure allies to exclude the Chinese telco from 5G infrastructure construction in Europe and elsewhere.
On May 15th, the U.S. Commerce Department put Huawei on a strict blacklist, strictly prohibiting supplying U.S. technology and products to the Chinese telecom giant. 5 days later, an adjustment was made to grant Huawei a 90-day reprieve to buy from American suppliers until August 19th. But Huawei has not ceased its progress, and it continues to fight against the effects of being placed on the blacklist. On the same day of the U.S. announcement, Huawei launched GhostDB, an AI-backed database to target enterprise customers. This puts it in direct competition with the likes of IBM, Oracle, and Microsoft. Meanwhile, Huawei has accelerated its speed in putting core products onto the market. On August 9th, Huawei officially unveiled its self-made operating system, Harmony OS, as a challenger to Apple's iOS and Google's Android. The company's new operating system is based on technology known as Arc Compiler, which Huawei spent 10 years developing. And in what could be crucial to the success of Harmony, it will be open source, which could greatly increase its adoption. Then there is Huawei's progress in becoming the leader in 5G technology. On August 16th, the company's flagship 5G handsets, priced at $880, sold out immediately when they went on sale in Chinese stores. And by Saturday, the number of phones ordered online had exceeded 1 million. Huawei's role in the international market is also expanding. On July 30th, in a press release on its financial performance in the first half of the year, Huawei announced it has secured 50 global deals on 5G infrastructure. This ranks the company first among all of its competitors. Huawei says its sales revenue over the same period also totaled over 401 billion yuan, or almost $6 billion, a year-on-year increase of 23.2%. This figure surpasses that of most of its competitors.
Without the promotion from Trump, few people in the world would know that Huawei is so powerful. We could even say that our market share has been helped along by Trump.
Huawei acknowledges that despite the progress, the company faces many challenges and obstacles, but it will face them head-on in the second half of the year and in the years to come. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
It's been nearly 2 months since protests against an extradition bill first began in Hong Kong. Local taxi drivers in the coastal city now say the ongoing unrest has led to a sharp decline in their daily incomes. CGTN's Huawei caught up with one of the taxi drivers in the financial hub and brings us this story.
Been a taxi driver about 18 years. 18 years? Yeah, 18 years. Well, I've never seen Hong Kong like this before.
Driver Chong Wai works 12 hours a day. Since the protests broke out in Hong Kong, his income has been shrinking.
Before we can earn $800 per day, and then now we just got like maybe 500. Like last month, our business is dropped off about 40% off.
On the day we met Mr. Wu, a rally was held by opposition groups, with hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, paralyzing traffic.
We are now on our way to the hotel, but it seems that we got stuck here because people are marching on the streets and some of the roads are blocked. And the taxi driver told me just now that something like this happens very often since June, and their business got very much affected.
Yeah, it's losing money every day. We are scared, but to go to the place like the protesters there, we are very afraid like that. Yeah.
And this is not an isolated case. There are 18,000 taxis in Hong Kong and 60,000 taxi drivers. Their difficulty in navigating around the unrest is compounded by a shortage of customers. Official data show global tourism to Hong Kong has dropped 30% since July. A local association of taxi drivers expressed concern.
We have received over 3,000 complaints from drivers within just last month, demanding we clearly state to the government that we oppose violence, we want the rioters to face strict law enforcement, we want peace.
Nobody knows how long the current situation will last, or how much money taxi drivers will ultimately lose. He Weiwei, CGTN, Hong Kong.
Plants, of course, need sunlight to grow, or do they? As indoor farming and smart farms become one more popular, demand for sources of reliable light is also on the rise. Much of the growth is being driven by horticultural LED light bulbs. CGTN's Shinham reports.
Tons of vegetables are grown in this smart farm every year, but not a speck of natural sunlight is used. That's because these plants rely on LED light sources that are designed to mimic the sun's rays.
We try to provide the optimal artificial lighting that a vegetable would need. If a plant would take 50 days to grow outdoors, we can grow in about 35 days.
Farm 8 is a leading South Korean agricultural cultivator that produces and distributes salad ingredients. Everything from lettuce to sprouts are grown in these vertical farm shelves. This one room alone, at roughly 200 square meters, can generate up to $10,000 a month in revenue, all with the help of a consistent light source using LED technology. The type of light a plant is exposed to will determine how it grows. Different wavelengths will affect a plant's taste and nutritional content. So it's a matter of finding a vegetable's optimized wavelength, or what is known as the ideal lighting recipe.
저희가 LED 칩을 배열을 만들어서 we can arrange LED memory chips to create a plant's optimized spectrum by turning the RGB values, as well as the PPFD, or photosynthetic proton flux density.
Semiconductors are the main source that power LED lights. South Korean companies produce nearly 2/3 of the world's memory chips. That's why local companies are driving growth in the global LED industry for horticulture, which is expected to reach over $120 billion over the next several years.
We see future opportunities in smart lighting and converging solutions with AI. We are continuing to develop and invest in new lighting sources that focus on helping plants grow in a smarter way.
Horticultural LED lights are more cost-efficient than other artificial light sources. And as global demand increases for healthier alternative food sources, LED technology will be lighting a path forward. Shane Hom, CGTN, Pyeongtaek, South Korea.
Let's look at the commodities market. Crude oil prices rose today following a weekend attack on a Saudi oil facility by Yemeni separatists, and as traders looked for signs that Sino-US trade tensions could ease, price gains were cut to some degree by an unusually downbeat OPEC report that stoked concerns about growth in oil demand. Brent crude, the international benchmark for oil prices, was up 55 cents or about 0.9% at $59.17 a barrel. Still ahead on Global Business. We'll tell you why this car wash has been voted Johannesburg's most loved sport to clean your wheels.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Peninah, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
To South Africa now, where one car wash has become a home away from home for people living in suburban Johannesburg. At Tubbs Car Wash, customers are getting their wheels cleaned while having a haircut. At the same time, they're allowed to tuck into traditional South African cuisines as they sport some top-end cars. CGTN's Angelo Coppola explains.
Car washes have been operating in and around South African townships and doing good business for their owners for many years. But what about people who have moved out of the townships into suburbia to be closer to their offices?
Our market is not just your average person. It's a director, it's a business person, it's a doctor, it's professionals. It's people that live within the suburbs where it's hard to literally get this type of food. So we've made it easy and provided a solution for people to literally drive from Sandton just down the road to just come get their favorite kind of meal.
It's a one-stop shop for people looking to get stuff done, including a haircut.
So it's more convenient for our clients because they can have a haircut, at the same time they wash their cars, they get food. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing the barber shop in this place.
People keep coming back here. It's a reminder of what life was like before they moved to the big city.
I love the vibe here, love the people. Like you say, it's home away from home. It is so convenient for me because I can eat, I can wash my car, and sometimes I use the hair salon facilities here.
I think for people who doesn't like to go to the malls and do all the stuff, it's easier for them to have everything right here.
Entrepreneurs spot opportunities in the weirdest of places, and once they've established that there is a need and there is a market, the people are going to be coming, and they've been coming here for years now. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Still in South Africa, a young designer is using a fresh, innovative and modern approach when manufacturing her jewelry. The Lashongwe Jewelry Design and Manufacturing Company incorporates inspiration gathered from both traditional African roots and contemporary influences in each piece of jewelry. CGTN's Ulisan Jamela tells us more.
Lashongwe celebrates and preserves the meaning behind her jewelry. Each piece celebrates the transition of life. From past to present, old to new, and dated to trend-setting. Njabu Griffiths is the founding member of Lashongwe Jewelry Designers. The company was founded in 2003 after Njabu got retrenched. She describes it as an outfit that has an innovative, dynamic approach to designing and creating accessories. With their roots firmly here in Africa, their designs incorporate traditional techniques with the latest trends in fashion and accessories.
I've chosen to make contemporary African jewelry. I think I've started where I know. I'm comfortable with the culture. I know a little bit more about our culture, so it was easy for me to start from a place of comfort, if I could put it that way.
One of Lashongwe's contemporary African jewelry pieces is this, inspired by the Zulu plug earring, which they customized to give something authentically African, but with a bit of a fashion flair.
What we've done, if we take, for instance, the Zulu earplug earring, we've taken it in its, in its modern form, and we've learned a little bit more about the Zulu culture, why they actually have the earrings in the first place, and we've sort of made them evolve to the modern, the more of a fashion flair. So yeah, we've sort of evolved, and it's more modern and contemporary.
Her main clientele is those who appreciate the origins of her designs.
Our clientele is mostly tourists and people that are looking for something that's authentically African and modern, or with a bit of fashion flair. So it's basically people that appreciate other cultures and things like that.
The company is 100% female-owned and employs a number of other women and young people. Ulisan Jamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And looking at the currencies, the South African rand was weaker against the dollar today after a slight recovery in earlier trade, while some analysts have warned that the currency is likely to remain volatile as global risk factors weigh on sentiment. Investor economists say that the rand's volatility is likely to continue this month as the period from May to September generally sees investors shy away from riskier assets. And with that, we come to the end of Global Business. We welcome your feedback. Send it to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for your company.